How'd you like to listen to .NET Rocks with no ads? Easy. Become a patron. For just $5 a month, you get access to a private RSS feed where all the shows have no ads. $20 a month will get you that and a special .NET Rocks patron mug. Sign up now at patreon.netrocks.com.
Hey, Carl and Richard here. As you may have heard, NDC is back, offering their incredible in-person conferences around the world. And we'd like to tell you about them. NDC Copenhagen is happening August 27th through the 31st. Go to ndccopenhagen.com for more information.
NDC Porto is happening October 16th through the 20th. Go to ndcporto.com to register.
And check out the full lineup of conferences at ndcconferences.com.
Hey there. This is Jeff Fritz, the purple blazer guy from Microsoft, letting you in on a little secret about my friend Carl Franklin. You know, the guy who started .NET Rocks, the first podcast about .NET. In 2002, the guy who's been teaching Blazor on YouTube since 2020. Yeah, that Carl Franklin. Well, Carl's joined up with the folks from Code in a Castle to teach a week-long hands-on Blazor class at, are you ready? Get this, at a castle/villa in Tuscany. It's sort of a luxury vacation with Blazor learning built in. Carl's calling it the Blazor Master Class. You'll learn Blazor from the ground up, finishing the week with the ability to build and deploy Blazor applications. Since the training happens for only 4 hours in the morning over 6 days, you can bring your significant other, your partner with you, and you should, right? This part of Italy is absolutely beautiful. There's so much to see and do, and Larry and Marco from Code in a Castle are organizing daily activities both at the castle and in the area. The castle is in the Maremma, a less touristed region of Tuscany, offering both classic Tuscan hill country as well as easy access to the Etruscan Riviera with sublime local food, wine, and olive oil around every corner. Breakfast is included every day. There will be 2 communal dinners at the castle bookending the experience, and most other meals and all activities are included. And did I mention you'll learn Blazor in person from Carl Franklin? Listen, space is limited and for very good reason. This is quality training in a beautiful setting. Go to codeinacastle.com/Blazor2023. That's BLAZOR 2023 to take advantage of this amazing opportunity to join Carl in Tuscany for an unforgettable week of La Dolce Vita while advancing your programming skills in this important new technology.
Welcome back to .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Cabell.
And what's going on over on your side of the continent, my friend?
You know what? Packing boxes and hauling them up to the coast. Like after we finish the show today, I'm literally loading the truck and taking a run up. We're trying not to end up with a storage locker, seeing how we're moving we have a very big house that we're moving out of with a lot of stuff into a smaller house that's already furnished.
Yeah, right.
So, it's just a juggling of a lot of stuff, but
you going to have a party?
There's a few parties. There's been a few parties.
Well, let me know. I might just make the trek.
It's a long way out, but we'll figure something out. Certainly when we're settled in up there, we'll do something fun. But it's good to be married to a woman who tends to argue with a spreadsheet anyway, because it didn't take us very long to figure out how much stuff the garage holds and say, okay, that's how much stuff we're allowed to keep.
Yeah.
And then condense accordingly.
Love it.
Yeah. It's organized.
Well, that's good to hear, Richard. Let's get started with Better Know a Framework.
Awesome.
All
right, man, what do you got?
Well, this being show 1857, you can go to 1857.pwop.me. And that's a link to an article at Digital Trends, which I think is kind of important. Maybe it's important. We'll find out. But anyway, it's called, Here's Why People Think GPT-4 Might Be Getting Dumber Over Time. As impressive as GPT-4 was at launch, some onlookers have observed that it has lost some of its accuracy and power. First of all, was it ever accurate? I don't know. But
Sometime. I mean, the underlying Harvard study is pretty great.
Yeah.
And they are modeling it. Well, I thought the bigger message from this thing was they're doing updates and not telling anyone.
Yes.
Right. Like this is all guesswork from everybody else, is that they're constantly refreshing this data set, it seems.
And they're not really talking about where their sources are or anything like that.
No, we don't really know.
Yeah. Well, anyway, and also I've noticed that don't ask it to do math.
That's not its thing.
It doesn't. It will lie and be very adamant that it is correct.
Yeah. It's,
yeah.
In the end, when you realize it's basically just text driven,
right,
and you're hoping that the text on the internet was accurate, which is a hilarious statement all by itself.
It is absolutely hilarious. Well,
yeah.
I'm sure Amber's got some opinions about this. That's what we're talking about, but we'll bring her on in a minute. First of all, who is talking to us today, Richard Campbell?
I grabbed a comment off of show 1605. So that's going back a bit, December of 2018, and not really about large language models, because who was talking about large language models in 2018? But this was a show we did with Jared Rhodes, who's at MVP.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about IoT and edge computing at the time. And mostly what we were talking about was this continuous data collection mechanism, like just our ability to collect a lot of data about people, especially with so much compute in so many places, with so much ability to gather and stream that information back. Mm-hmm. And we ended up in an ethical conversation around data collection. And so Mike had this comment on the show shortly after it was published. He says, "This is a great ethical discussion about collecting data. I always revert back to Kranzberg's first law of tech, which is that tech is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral." Which, I actually went and looked it up. It's from 1964.
Doesn't it have to be one of those?
It doesn't have to be, right? It's like, again, we are personifying or anthropomorphizing technology. It's the people using the tool that is the issue.
So it just is.
Yeah. The thing is, when we attribute it to the technology rather than the people who operate it.
Right. Yeah.
Right. We're giving agency where agency doesn't exist.
Mm.
The mentioned stores data gathering is troubling. So this is one of the devices we were talking about. You obviously opt in by seeing the monitor and continuing to enter, but is that enough? Shouldn't the customer know to what extent their behavior will be analyzed and for what purpose? What of the patrons who, beyond their own control, only have access to that store? Are you now alienating their business and taking advantage of the situation to gather data? So this is that store monitoring system where they're figuring out what people's buying behavior is just by, having these sensors, right?
Yeah.
Programming ethics has always fascinated me. Recent protests, of course, this is 2018, if you can call back to that, recent protests by Google employees over developing censoring products for the Chinese government and military machine learning for the U.S. government highlights the backlash these companies face when adopting technologies for different applications. But it always boils down to this. You will always be able to find a developer to do what you want to have done.
Right.
There will always be someone with the ethics that align with yours or who's desperate enough to do that work for you. This isn't unique to programming. However, programming has a unique advantage of being cheap to scale. So one developer can have a profound impact on humanity versus one unethical police officer or one unethical investor. Mm-hmm. Had Bernie Madoff know how to make an ASP.NET site, he could have offered his services anonymously to many more people. So it's always a great discussion on what to do responsibly. How do companies talk about this? My experience is most don't.
Right.
But we will eventually need to.
Yeah.
So just seemed to be on point with what we were talking about today. And what certainly, what I love is dragging out a conversation from 5 years ago and getting pretty relevant.
Yeah.
Kind of on the point.
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of there. Hey, Mike, thanks so much for your comment. And a copy of Music to Code By, it's on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on the Facebooks. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and I read in the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Code By.
And you can definitely follow us on Twitter if you want, but we're on Mastodon. I'm on Mastodon a lot more these days. I don't know about you, Richard, but
I'm here and there,
Yeah, if you want to follow me on Mastodon, it's Carl Franklin at techhub.social.
And I'm Rich Campbell at mastodon.social.
And send us a toot. Rudy toot. Tooty toot toot. Boot. Scoot. Toot.
You're back there, are you? Okay.
Toot, scoot, boogie. Okay, let's bring in Amber. Amber McKenzie is head of data science and analytics at HR tech startup FAMA, F-A-M-A. Her background is in computer science and linguistics, and she's been doing data science, machine learning, and natural language processing for almost 15 years now. Welcome back, Amber.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Happy to be here.
And we had the ethics and AI conversation with you like 4 years ago. But I think when I wrote the email to him, like, I don't know if you've noticed, but some stuff has happened.
A few things.
And you pretty much picked up that thread. And you're like, yeah, a few things have happened.
Little stuff here and there. Yeah, it's an interesting time.
Are we now in a place where we're really challenging that debate? Like that 4 years ago when we were talking about sort of the bias in the machine learning models and that kind of thing. Is ChatGPT just that writ large?
You know, it's interesting to me, and I've had this conversation a lot with people lately. There is sort of this idea that ChatGPT is like some new, way different, next level, and to some degrees it is, but in my mind, it's not any different than some of the innovations we've had over the years. I mean, you know, we went from always sending letters to sending email. That was a huge, big, different thing, right? We came out, you know, when Watson came out, everybody was like, oh, that's going to change the game. That's going to be the new thing, right? And then it was Google, and now it's ChatGPT. And what essentially is going to happen is that the opposite side, the people who are trying to regulate it, trying to create things to combat, you know, bias or combat, you know, deep fakes, that type of thing, is just going to catch up, right? It's always kind of a game of cat and mouse.
Yep.
Yeah. It always is.
Yeah. But at least we know what we're racing against. Like I would hope.
Yeah.
You know, accuracy is actually important.
It is. I mean, I don't know. I look at, I liken it a lot to Google. We look to Google, and Google doesn't have all of the right things. And when we first came out, we were like, you know, oh, it's all magic information. And then everybody's like, well, you got to check the sources. I would argue that when we used to all look up everything on encyclopedias, that wasn't all exactly right. So like, it's just
clearly, though, the way people are perceiving it is different than all of these other things. I mean, I don't remember that much kerfuffle between governments and agencies getting together and saying, what are we going to do about this? You know, we need regulation around this. I mean, I guess they did with Google and Microsoft to some extent, but you know, other AI things haven't been as hitting you over the head. What as this is?
I'm glad to see it, though. I mean, I remember, so I worked at Sandia in an internship, and one of the problems they had at the time is all the national labs and all the agencies weren't even working together for, you know, cybersecurity purposes.
Sure.
So, you know, they would come up with one person would come up with a solution for a 0-day attack, and then they wouldn't share it. And that's what they were working on at the time, was just getting to a point where they would even share information. So the fact that we're already like, hey, we've got this new thing out there, we need to come together and put the guardrails in place, is for me kind of a refreshing take on things. And it's like, oh yeah, people recognize now that it's not just a put it out there, let it run wild thing. Let's figure out the best way to, you know, especially for the sort of non-technically inclined people who don't, you know, have some of the understanding that is, oh, I've got to take this with a grain of salt. I need to, you know, check this or check that. So saying, hey, let's try and put, you know, the bowling bumpers on and make this thing, you know, go down the lane a little bit easier.
Yeah. The thing that worries me about government regulation isn't the regulation itself. I think that's great, but it's that government takes so long to do things and to regulate. And this thing is evolving faster than anything we've seen before in tech at a much more rapid pace. For example, I just read an article in The Verge that ChatGPT can now remember who you are and what you want with new custom instructions. You might not have to tell the chatbot your life story every time you have a question, but do you know what you want the bot to know? I'll put a link to that.
That doesn't surprise me. And I think in those instances, the private sector is going to be the one. I mean, there's going to be essentially the market opens up for industry to say, hey, let's find the tech that combats that. And there'll be a market for that. People looking to, to fill that gap. But I agree with you. The big cogs are slow.
Yeah, I hope the government does big picture regulation rather than, picking on these features and those features, which can easily change from under the regulations and screw everything up.
That's where I like the data source one you brought up before. It's like just at least publish where you got your data from.
Publish where that came from. Yep.
I don't know if you see that as reasonable, Amber. Like,
oh, for sure. I mean, that in terms of, that's what's interesting about what's happened recently. For me, it is not the development of these algorithms. That's been happening. They're just taking it to a new level. It was the mass market of it. They put marketing resources around it. They packaged it up. They made it suddenly visible, and that changes the stakes of the game, from something that is research based. You put papers around it. People have to review the papers. They need to have reproducibility to, now it is a product, a commodity, which puts it in a different space.
Which, by the way, Microsoft just got a nice big old fat stock price bump on. Like the market has spoken.
Microsoft's killing it in the stock market.
We talked about this on Windows Weekly. It's like they put out at Inspire that it's $30 a month per person. And you're like, holy man, that's a lot. An E3 subscription's only $36. But if you want the Copilot, now it's an extra $30. Stock price goes up 5%. Like, if I'm Satya Nadella, like, I'm laughing all the way to the bank. Like, that's a lot of money.
What's your opinion, Amber, on the general public's acceptance of this stuff? I mean, it's been my experience that people are kind of like, oh, that's cool. And they use it when they can and they don't think too much about it. But I guess these new regulations, some of the stuff that they're floating around is, we want to have some sort of, watermark on anything that has been generated by AI, whether it's text or video or whatever. But that, of course, puts it in the hands of the content creators. And so you'll have the problem where everybody who's following the law and everything will use the watermark. And then those who want to publish stuff for nefarious purposes won't use it.
I mean, that's the case with everything, right?
Yeah.
For me, it's one more thing that we have to teach about. I mean, right now, even in my kids' English classes, they are taught about primary sources. They are taught about not just finding something on the web and taking it at face value, and that they can't just take that information, roll it into an essay, and their teachers are going to take it. That's going to be just one more thing in that realm that has to be taught. But I don't see, you see degrees. It's almost like the Kevin Bacon thing. You see the degrees of separation. It's like, we're in tech. We are uniquely aware of it. And then you've got people who are pretty tech savvy who are like, yeah, this is cool. Maybe, like I have a friend who had it write his resignation letter, stuff like that. And then you get, to my parents who probably don't even know that it's happening right now. And it's like that degree of separation requires just more and more education about it. And I think that's what I hope the government even if it takes a little while, the sort of the guardrails, if you will essentially help those people who, aren't going to go through the diligence of understanding it and understanding how to use it and what to do with it and try and mitigate, the damage that can be done there. Because again, it's the same thing. I liken it to Google. I have grandparents who go and Google something and they're like, oh, but this. And I'm like,
right.
No, that's just not accurate. That's just not the case.
Right.
And it's the same, it's the same type of thing. And then the watermark stuff. I think we're going to come out that the software is going to come out to try and spot plagiarism, fakes, that type of thing. It's just going to have to catch up, right? At this point.
It's going to get ugly. It's going to get so ugly.
But, I don't know that it's going to be any uglier than it already is. It's just becoming more obvious that it is ugly. Like, I think your language there, Amber, about they Googled this, so it must be true, right? Just there's no thought to the idea of where that data came from that Google surfaced for you is not in consideration for most people.
Right. Yep.
Or at least for some people anyway. Certainly. Then we get into the confirmation bias thing where it's like, I look for the link that sounds most like what I want to sound like, and that's the one I use.
Absolutely. And in that respect, nothing has changed. Again, as you talked about earlier, it's the scalability issue. It just makes it more accessible. In the olden days, we just had, snake oil people, right? But they were still doing that, right? Like they're going around in their wagons and they're telling people stuff and selling stuff. And it was harder for them to get around and spread that message, but it was still happening. It's just now it's easy. It's in your face. It's accessible. It just gets further and further that way.
What if watermarks become required and then there are penalties for those who don't use them? I can just see that turning into a shite show. I mean, how? I mean, when are we going to put I find it something to tweet, and ChatGPT helped me write it. Do I have to put that on my tweet? And now, does that mean that somebody's going to look at that and say, "Oh, that didn't come from my brain"? You know what I mean? And then if I don't do it, what am I going to pay a fine? And how much is the fine going to be? Is it going to be more than Elon Musk charges me a month to use Twitter?
I can't imagine there'd be a fine. I think more likely my viewer that said, I'll have the option to say, I only want stuff that has a watermark. And so your stuff just won't be visible if it doesn't pass that quality gate.
Yeah.
The market's going to dictate that. I mean, to some degree, you're already seeing some of it where there have been ramifications for people that have used ChatGPT in their jobs, right?
Yeah.
Or on their resumes or something like that. And it's already, you've seen instances where it's come to kind of bite them. Those things are going to happen. The people are still going to do some of the bad stuff and get away with it, as they always do. And in my mind, we're going to end up in some middle ground. I don't think it's ever going to be as far as like super regulated. That just doesn't ever really happen. They're going to try, and there's going to be some backlash. And then we're going to cut out a bulk of the easy stuff that people are trying to do, and people will find that it's not worth it to lose their job or whatever. And we'll end up in a space where some people use it for good and some people use it for bad. And
well, this is that Gartner hype cycle, right? I think we've come off the peak of inflated expectations and we're headed down into the trough of disillusionment right now. And then you sort of climb your way back out into sort of reasonable expectations, what it can and can't do. I mean, I've certainly been encouraging people, don't use this software to try and discover facts.
Right.
Use it to discover ideas. It's a good creative tool, but any fact you want that it spits out, you need to validate, and you'll find a stunning number of them are incorrect.
Yeah. Stunning is right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's the classic one, the one that I first said, okay, well, here we go down the trough, was the lawyers that used it to write summaries to their cases that cited cases that simply did not exist.
Didn't exist. Yep.
And they didn't check.
Yep.
But you know who did check? The judge. And then they were in big trouble because it was their name on it.
Yeah.
You can't use the software wrote it excuse. Like, it's not a thing.
Mm-hmm.
You submitted this as you. You're on the hook for submitting inaccurate information.
Yeah. And then, the industry, at that point we'll see and be like, oh, you know what? That's not lucrative for me to do. It doesn't, It might save me time, but it doesn't, the risk is not worth the reward.
And I got to think that's just like a cautionary tale to lawyers, full stop. Like, how many lawyers are like, okay, well, we're not using this now because it's at a risk. Although I think at the same time, I think that's an overreaction too. It's like, check your facts.
Right.
That's always a good idea, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Set down guidelines. I mean, like my company sent out, so they encouraged us to explore ChatGPT, find ways that it could kind of help us do things. But they also sent out essentially a regulatory doc that we need to sign that's like, hey, these are the boundaries, right? Like, these are the ways to use it and the ways not to use it. And I imagine a lot of companies will do that, right? And it's like, hey, this is how we're okay with you guys using this tool.
This is going to become a part of the employee handbook.
Yep.
Especially when you see Microsoft and presumably Google productizing it.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, if the company is paying for it for you, there better be guidelines.
Yeah.
I mean, you would hope.
I think so.
I mean, we're still premature here. This is coming out in early August. We haven't actually laid our hands on M365 Copilot, even though they've announced a price. Like, you can't just buy it yet. So we still don't actually know what it's going to do for us, as to whether or not it's worth $30 a month per person.
Well, and that's where the market dictates, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They have to, I mean, just with any other software, you've got to come out with the value to warrant the price. And if they don't, then people won't pick it up.
Right.
Well, I think this is the other side of this, which is that we're still trying to figure out if this is a product people are actually willing to pay for. And because the other thing we don't really know is the cost of operations. Like, we know what they're willing to charge for it, but I'm fascinated to know how much it's costing Microsoft to run those models on our behalf, essentially for free. I don't know how many folks have signed up for ChatGPT Plus, and much less what it's costing ChatGPT on the back end.
I did. I have ChatGPT Plus, and then I went to use the API, and I found that, that's a separate charge, the GPT-4 API. And not only that, but you have to put your name on a waiting list.
Right.
Oh.
So, yeah, if you want to use the API, even to use stuff like the Playground, which I've been using on the AI Bot show with Brian McKay, you have to be validated and pay extra for that, because it does more than ChatGPT.
I mean, I do feel a little bit good about this gatekeeping. Like, it's not like this thing's sitting out in open source and anybody can set one of these LLMs up and run it however they want. Like, the fact that you have to be an authenticated developer, so they kind of know who you are, and then you're working against their instance. Like, that at least gives me some sense of governance.
Right.
Yeah. And they just don't, I mean, at this time, it takes an enormous amount of resources to pre-train one of these, right? And then a lot of what they're doing over the time is fine tuning, right? Tweaking it. And so, and I'm seeing, the job listings are out there now, right? To work on these things, to do some of the fine tuning and that sort of stuff. And that too, kind of what you were talking about in the beginning about whether it's degrading or not. And that's, I think, it does so many things that trying to test a handful of things that it does not really test the entirety of it and what it's capable of and that sort of thing. But that's going to be it's going to take, I think, a good bit to try and manage that process, right? They're fine tuning it and having to basically, because they've put it out to the public, look at how that's received. Just like a software product, right? Do you put out an update and people get all mad about it, right? And then you have to kind of go back and tweak it. It's going to take them a while to sort out that management, I think. I
got a sense that when they put ChatGPT out in November of 22, it's because they had run all the tests they could think of. And so now it was, well, instead of continuing to pay for people to write prompts to validate this behavior, we can get it for free by putting it out in public.
Yeah.
Right. Except for that whole 100 million users signing up in 60 days thing, which was weird. I don't think anybody planned on that. I mean, their reaction to that was clearly intentional, but I don't think anybody started in November of 22 saying, 100 million people are going to sign up for this in 2 months.
Well, that's a new, in the last few years, that's a new space for us. It didn't used to be that things like that traveled that quickly, right? Even though we're all digital and that sort of thing. But now, I mean, my kids know about new things before I do because it gets blasted out on TikTok and goes all over the place, right? And that's new, especially for us older people, right? It's like, how does everybody in my neighborhood now know about this thing?
Know about this thing because TikTok.
It's craziness.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting aspect of that. But, I'm not a big fan of the folks saying, hey, we should put a pause on this. It shouldn't be productized. My instinct is against that. And yet when we talk this way, it's like, it pretty clear you probably productized too soon. Like, you have not tested the edges of this product. At the same time, I also see Microsoft looking at it going, they're probably spending millions a month in Azure resources operating this thing. If you can't get customers signed up for it soon, you might have to turn it off. Like, that's just a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird space to be in. I mean, and it's, it's a product essentially that has gone viral that you really didn't, I imagine they expected some, but I'm with you. I imagine they didn't expect sort of the degree to it. And it's like, how do you manage that with any sort of product, right? All of a sudden, everybody has it and they all have opinions about it. And, how do you scale that up, and do you pull it back, or do you try and tweak it, and how you manage expectations and backlash and all of that stuff? I mean, there's a reason I work at smaller companies. There's just a lot of stuff there that I'm just not interested in managing.
Because at the same time, you've got Google with Bard saying, hey, this isn't ready yet. We're going to hold this back. And I think there's a sense of folks who are saying, oh, you just say your thing's not working yet. It's like, pretty sure the other thing isn't working yet either. But, there's all these degrees of working.
They're playing the game, right? Yeah. And there's always the thing, like, you always have to take that gamble. When do you do something? When's the right time? Is it going to pay off for me to wait and put out something that's later, maybe more mature and received better? Or maybe they're missing out because they're missing out on this initial fervor. Yeah. Again, that's not stuff that I'm very good at. So also a reason I will never run a company.
It's a great startup story. It's like, do you want to be the first mover because first mover has advantages? Or do you look at it as the pioneer's the one with the arrows in his back?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Both can be true.
It makes me think of that. Have you seen the F1 show on Netflix? I wasn't really into F1 until I saw it. It's really good. I highly recommend it. But the
racing cars.
Yeah. Yeah. And they show a lot of like the behind the scenes, like decisions about, if it's raining, do you decide to put your raining tires on now or later, or try and extend the things, or do you, when do you maneuver and all that stuff? There's just so much, intricacy that goes into that. And it's the same type of thing. It's like, when do I put my car out, or when do I hold it back? Could we then surge ahead? And some of it pans out and some of it doesn't.
Yeah. Does getting a 3-month jump on a market give me more advantage than doing 3 more months of research?
Right.
Before I release. It's a great question. And obviously we're seeing it play out right now, and 2 different positions, I think, to a large degree, I think.
Oh, it'll be the source of books.
Without a doubt.
In a couple of years, right? There'll be so many books about it, and what worked and what didn't, and what you can learn for your own company in the future. Absolutely.
The race for AI. No, I see it. Absolutely. And Amber, I'm going to interrupt for one moment for this very important message. And we're back. It's .NET Rocks. I'm Richard Campbell. That's Carl Franklin.
Yep.
Talking to our friend Amber McKenzie a little bit about, well, I just called this the ethics of large language models, but I think there is some ethical conversation going on here as we try and figure out the consequences of what's being built and being basically played out in front of us. I wonder how much of this also is just the culture of modern software development, where it's like, just stick it in front of the customers. We have telemetry and we'll fix it via the internet going forward.
Yeah.
You don't, it's almost like you don't have to be responsible anymore because it's all fixable.
It's true. But also, like, you put this thing out and, you don't like how it works. You think it's getting worse. Well, I've got all these other people lined up to use it, that sort of thing. It's like, well, we'll get the feedback. The feedback is oftentimes more valuable than anything else. Right.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly where ChatGPT started, was just a feedback mechanism for more prompts and more data on how it was behaving and how people were reacting to it. So, it's just, the sudden flip to make it a product. It's interesting to see if it's going to be good, and what that even looks like. I'm still not convinced that this isn't a dead end. Because my experience with software has generally been, if the only way you know how to make it better is to make it bigger, it's probably not that good.
Yeah. I've been saying that about LLMs lately. They're just, I'm one of those, when I non-jumpers is what I call myself. So I tend to wait on a lot of things. Like if my company rolls out a new software that we're going to be using, I'm like, I'm not going to dive all into it. I'm going to wait to see if we're really going to use that, or in a couple of months, they're going to be like, no, we made the wrong decision.
Right.
And so I actually have not been as all in on it. I think that there's probably, could I spend some time and really find ways to help my productivity or that sort of thing? Yeah, but it hasn't been this thing that I've been like, oh my gosh, that makes all the difference. I've got to use it, and I'm waiting to see where it goes.
I mean, a lot of times that's true too, that if you're the second mover, you don't get the arrows in the back and you get the advantages of their hits to say, okay, this is a better way to use it.
Yeah.
And maybe some better tooling. Like there's a lot of second mover advantage there.
Is English the only language that ChatGPT and GPT-4 uses? And is that an issue?
So I don't know the answer. I would assume not. I mean, the machine translation space is pretty solid and we have a lot of data in other languages, but I actually don't know.
Right. But is it translation at that point? I mean, because language models are that, right? It's trained on language. There's
actually been ChatGPT is available in 50 languages.
Okay.
That's first and foremost, right?
There you go.
But there have been some great papers about the tokenization strategy and how it doesn't map symmetrically to all languages because different languages have different architectural constraints. And
because it was trained on English, wasn't it?
Well, fundamentally, the tokenization technique was built by English speakers.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't even say it's the training set per se, in that the idiomatic structure of the tokens is based on people who were thinking in English. And so there was a really great piece I read about its mistakes in Urdu. Not that I speak Urdu. I mean, I know it's in Pakistan and it's a very old language, but architecturally a fundamental different language, and the token system just didn't work as well for.
I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah. And it just begs the question, like if Grant were here, he would be saying, what's language anyway? It changes all the time. So what's formal English language today or Urdu language today will change in 10 years. I am reminded of that awesome show, Knight Rider. Do you remember that? Knight Rider with Kit, the car, the AI car, right? And I thought one of the funniest things I ever heard about that, one of the funniest bits was from Eddie Murphy, who's like, the door is ajar. He says, if that were in the hood, it'd be like, beep, 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 beep. Hey, yo, man, someone stole your battery. I said, we go get him.
It's true, though. Yeah, that's actually that speaks back to the data bias situation where the amount of data that you have in different languages or different dialects or whatever really does dictate sort of the outcome that you're going to get from any of these models. And most of it is in, more English oriented or white oriented English, right?
Yeah, white English. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And part of this also is now it seems to be the philosophy that a larger data set is better.
Yeah.
And so and I look at it, I go over and look at Wikipedia and say, there's far more English articles than anything else. Are they more accurate because there's more and more participation? Or are there other languages with fewer articles that are actually higher quality?
Well, the argument that more data is better, it has nuances, right? So if you are doing a particular thing, having more data that speaks to the thing that you need to do, yes, that is accurate. But say you're doing classification, you've got 5 classes, having more data in one of your classes that you have the most data for is actually, it degrades the model for the other ones. So having more data in that first bucket, say white English, having more data there does actually not help. It actually will bias the model towards those things.
Right.
So you need more data in a diverse area. You need more data in the places that you don't have a lot of data, or if you don't have data about a certain subject, or if you don't have data in a certain thing you're trying to do, that helps, but not across the board.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you have to, when tokenizing, you have to determine, okay, does this apply to every culture, every language, or is this a language or culture specific thing? Right.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not smart enough to do that. to know that.
Well, and it's twofold. It's the linguistic part that is sort of the translation, or the how do I, when I'm setting up questions, when I'm setting up prompts and I'm translating those into other languages, or even if I have a model that'll take it from other languages, if I don't have enough data to support that, then it's not going to be as good. But then the cultural differences. So if even if it's the same English, if other cultures write questions in a different way, if they speak in a different way, if they provide their thoughts in a different way, then it's not going to be as effective.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is where, like, you can go to the platform Tokenizer on OpenAI and actually see how it tokenizes English, at least in GPT-3, just to get an idea of what they're talking about, and then recognize how English centric that actually is.
Absolutely.
Now, again, I don't know enough languages to say now if I was fluent in, and I would prefer not even a Romance language, something very different. Do the tokens actually make sense? I don't know how much work has been done in that area.
Richard, when you say you can see how it's tokenized, is it tokenizing your questions or the data that it's trained on?
You can literally just write some text and it'll show you.
What about the data that it's trained on? That's my.
No, it doesn't do that. But I'm just saying, folks are asking about tokenization, and it's like, look, I'll include a link in the show notes. But you can literally take text, plug it into that, and it'll show you how the tokenizer represents it.
Well, and this ends up being a problem. Actually, the productization of it becomes a problem there, because products are oriented towards their users. So, if you're making it a product and you're trying to sell it, you're going to make it work best for the majority of the people who want to buy it. And that oftentimes is not the marginalized communities.
Well, and you get into, now you have all the market forces, which is what's the appropriate demographic for me to optimize return, especially in the early days of a product like this, where they're desperate to get some returns quickly. They're not looking at diversity or any of those things. They're like, who's got the money that we know how to sell to now?
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, I go back to M365, the Copilot, which seems to be the first one really productized since GitHub Copilot, where they're targeting large American corporations.
Yep.
Because they're already customers. They're going to use it en masse. Like, there's a lot of reasons. I totally get why they would do that, but it has nothing to do with any kind of sense of diversity to the data.
That's probably a bigger concern in my mind than, some of the misinformation stuff. The misinformation has happened and it will happen, and people will make things to combat that. But there isn't a market to combat the lack of diversity and bias. There are smaller groups who work towards it. But again, if it's a product and somebody keeps it, privately held and that sort of thing, there isn't an impetus for them to fix that. And that widens the tech gap. It widens the gap for people having, access to things that other people have access to. It sort of heads us in a direction that we've been going.
And that's where you really have the argument about making a product in this particular scenario, is that because of the need to show returns quickly, you're going to bias towards where those returns are likely to come from.
Yep.
Although, in our past conversations, you said, like, step one of dealing with any bias is know it's there.
Yeah. What's step two?
Well, in this case, you have to care about it.
Yeah. Well, I think we always did, but, or we always were supposed to.
But that's, again, where it comes into the product side, is like, when you take it out of the research, right? The research arena oftentimes will penalize for bias for things like that, because you have a diverse group of researchers who are like, hey, did you think about this thing? And we care about that. We're not going to, approve your paper or whatever it is if you haven't done your due diligence. Right. Then you take it out of that realm and put it into, a commercial product. What do they get for increasing the diversity there? What benefit does it do them? In fact, it's probably worse for them, because they have to put more time and resources into something that they're not going to get a return from. So
yeah, it's, to me, and again, I've done enough product work to be pretty comfortable with these terminologies. It's like, you go get your pioneering group and you kind of want them to all be the same because you've only got so many resources.
Yep.
diversity quotient only comes in when we're trying to broaden the customer base. It's literally the second half before that even becomes a question.
Absolutely.
Where it's like, we are now limiting our market by not being broad enough.
Well, and if you think about the people who are going to pay for ChatGPT, it's often not going to be, a diverse group.
There's a whole bunch of this world that is not going to be able to pay for ChatGPT. It's already priced at the monthly income of a non-trivial chunk of this world. Mm-hmm. So, and that's a whole other can of worms, right? We already have multinationals where pricing varies by country, and that we could get there. I don't know that that's true. And I would also say we're arguing over a product that's, I think, yet to show profound value.
Yep.
It's certainly created profound hype, but show me that, the company with a huge competitive advantage because they've been using this technology. Lots of people are talking about it. They're certainly using excuses to lay people off over it. But, I want to see 2 quarters after that and say, did you actually get better? Were your customers happier? Like, I don't know that any of us know the answers to those things yet.
Yeah. I think there's going to be opportunities, especially in the sort of data science and machine learning consulting realm, to really speed up, those consulting opportunities, right? To take them from something that, you have to kind of train a new thing every time and tailor it to your client, but then to get ahead of some of the competition, say, hey, we can significantly cut down on that time. But for all the companies that don't necessarily have in-house data science, machine learning, that sort of thing, are they suddenly going to be able to pick up ChatGPT and have it make a big difference in that area? Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And funny thing is, like, this is what Microsoft's also been known for, is the commoditization of certain technologies.
Yeah, sure.
Making it very easy to get into things. So stuff that typically needed experts, you could use these tools without the experts and you wouldn't get a superior experience. Like, arguably we'd consistently get an inferior experience, but perhaps good enough that it was worthwhile.
Yeah. I think it goes back to them not anticipating how big it would get immediately, right?
Yeah. I don't want to present the idea that anyone had a plan here, because I don't think it's true. I think they're all making it up as they go right now. That the 100 million users wowed them. So they pointed at Bing, of all places, and Bing got 100 million users. This is a 100 million user machine. Let's go.
Yep. It's an interesting space right now.
Well, and I'm excited to talk to you because you come from the science side of this and the academic knowledge side of this. And I can see, because we can see each other while we're recording this, like, the productization of this stuff is the worst. I think for someone from your space, it's like, you're doing what with my thing? Where? How?
Right.
And literally it's like that sort of grotesque. And then they took the sledgehammer to it to get it to fit into the square, like just hammering it through a box to get it to customers.
There have been some musical artists who are demanding that, or who are offering royalties or something like that, or demanding royalties. What's the story there, Richard? I'm confused about this, but I remember talking to you about it.
I mean, there's certainly a question about, rights to the data used in the training models. And you can see the thought that as a developer running these models, because they're all behind, you believe they're all behind the scenes. So it doesn't really matter. I'm not taking a copy of your thing. I'm not using your thing per se. It's just being munged in a big neural net.
Right.
Like, why should I care? And everything was fine until DALL-E started spitting out Getty logos. Then it wasn't fine.
Yes.
Right. There was no intent here. There was no plan here. I think devs have always been doing what devs were doing until the logo started appearing in the pictures. And then there's like and I love that it was Getty, because Getty is the greatest pursuer of copyright you've ever seen. Heaven help you if you use a Getty picture without permission.
It's all it just opened up a lot of stuff that I think people have been talking about for a while, but that the need wasn't so great that people had to really pursue, some of these. I mean, we had to do some of that, right? Napster days, and then there's Spotify days and all of that stuff. Everything's always changed, and it's just one more time that those things are going to have to change. But the speed with which it came out, it's going to take a little bit for the extra things to catch up and be like, all right.
But we have been having this conversation for years, including the three of us.
Yeah.
Like, in some ways, this is a useful forcing function. Okay. I've now finally made a thing that's showing up in the public gestalt. Now we've been talking about treating data maturely, respecting copyright, considering bias, like all of those things. Now you gotta, because we're now starting to stick it in front of regular people who don't know how problematic these data collections and utilization methods have been.
Yeah. I mean, that's what normally drives innovation, right?
Every time.
Other innovation.
There was no driver's licenses until cars started killing people.
Yeah.
True.
Right. Like, just hopefully we can get to a point of some moderation with this before folks die. I would rather not have folks die over this crazy bit of software.
Yeah. Crazy is right, man. People are going nuts.
It's true. I hope the same thing comes to fruition on the environmental impact side, because these models are very expensive and very impactful to train.
Yeah.
And now that they are out there and people are using them, that likely means that more of them are going to be trained and more of them are going to be deployed. And it's like, okay, how are we going to then also mitigate that impact as well?
Well, there's one good thing that comes out of it is now people won't be complaining so much about how much water it takes to grow a steak.
Don't know if that's true. I was thinking more in terms of, just when crypto was winding down and giving back those resources, we found a new place to put them.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Yep.
And if you want to make an AI person angry in a big hurry, just call it the new crypto. That's a good way to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Make them very angry.
Fighting
You will
words.
not get a Christmas card from that person. That's not a happy thing to say.
That's awesome.
And I also think it's not true. Like, it doesn't seem to be trying to separate people with their money quite as vociferously. But the bill, the rates are, the prices are starting to come in. I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It's true. It'll be an interesting back half of the year.
Yeah.
So, Amber, what's next for you? What's in your inbox?
Well, I'm doing good things at Pharma. I'm happy to be there. And for me, I'm finally just in a steady state, which is great. And looking forward to kind of just seeing where things go. I've been throwing a lot of energy into sort of mentoring and growing the next data science leaders. I've noticed that there's a lot of, they teach a lot about the data science, and then they find people who are like, oh, well, you look like you could lead. We're going to throw you into leadership, but they don't do a lot of teaching about data science for business value or data science, and the bigger picture and how to lead a team and that sort of thing. So I've been doing a lot of mentoring of some of the younger data scientists, which I've been really enjoying.
Wow, that's great.
Well, yeah, you're doing the people's work for sure, because goodness knows we need more knowledgeable people in this space. Lots of people using data, not enough data scientists.
Yep.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, Amber, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about this. It's not a topic that's going away soon, and I'm sure it's going to change by the next time we have you on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you back.
Yeah, you bet. And we'll talk to you, dear listener, next time on .NET Rocks.
.NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.
Got a transmitter banned by the FCC. Yes, I'm a